Hello, my dear students, and welcome back to K. Gutte's online lecture series. So, you are here with myself, Dr. K. W. Gutte, your course educator. In this episode of video lecture, we are going to deal with tenets of liberal humanism. Liberal humanism can be defined as a philosophical and literary movement in which man and his capabilities are the central concern. It can also be defined as a system of historically changing views that recognizes the value of the human being as an individual and his right to liberty and happiness. There are some aspects to liberal humanism that have been made into what is called the tenets. They are invisible guidelines literary critics use when reading a text. It is said that they can only be brought to the surface by a conscious efforts of will, as it is said by Peter Berry. The first tenet or principle of liberal humanism is good literature is timeless, transcend, and speaks to what is constant in human nature. The first thing naturally is an attitude to literature itself. Good literature is of timeless significance. It somehow transcends the limitations and peculiarities of the age it was written in, and thereby speaks to what is constant in human nature. Such writing is not for an age, but for all time, as Ben Jonson said of Shakespeare. It is news which stays news. This is Ezra Pound's definition of literature. It means that good literature is timeless. There is no limitation of time to the good literature. It transcends all the time limitations, and it will be new as it is written at the present time. Second tenet of liberal humanism is literary text contains its own meaning. The literary text contains its own meaning within itself. It doesn't require any elaborate process for placing it within a context, where this be socio-political, the context of a particular social background or political situation, or literary or historical, whereby the work could be seen as the product of the literary influences of other writers or as shaped by the conventions of particular genres, or autobiographical, that is, as determined by the personal details of the author's life and thought. So the literary text, it doesn't require anything to have its meaning, because that text itself is self-contained as far as the meaning is concerned. Of course, as scholars, most academics would assert the value of studying these contexts. But as critics, their adherence to the approach which insists upon the primacy and self-sufficiency of the words on the page commits them to the process which has been called on-site close reading. Essentially, this removes the text from all these contexts and presents it unseen for unaided explication by the trained mind. The third tenet is text therefore studied in isolation without ideological assumptions or political conditions. To understand the text well, it must be detached from these contexts and studied in isolation. What is needed is the close verbal analysis of the text without prior ideological assumptions or political preconditions, or indeed specific expectations of any kind, since all these are likely to interfere fatally with what the 19th century critic Matthew Arnold said was the true business of criticism: to see the object as in itself it really is. So, the critic should get the meaning of the text in isolation without assumptions, without ideological assumptions or political conditions. Fourth tenet of liberal humanism is that human nature is unchanging and continuity valued over innovation. That is, human nature is essentially unchanging. The same passions, emotions, and even situations are seen again throughout human history. It follows that continuity in literature is more important and significant than innovation. Thus, a well-known 18th century definition of poetry maintains that it is what often was thought but never so well expressed. Likewise, Samuel Johnson famously denigrated Sterne's novel Tristram Shandy on the grounds of its novelty, that is, its originality. Fifth tenet is individuality as essence, securely possessed by each transcendent subject, distinct from forces of society, experience, and language. Individuality is something securely possessed within each of influences and our unique essence. This transcends our environmental influences, and though individuality can change and develop, it can't be transformed. Hence, our uneasiness with those scenes which involve a change of heart in a character so that whole personality is shifted into a new dimension by force of circumstances. The miser is transformed and changes his ways, or the good man or woman becomes corrupted by wealth. Such scenes imply a malleability in the essence of character which is at odds with this underlying assumption of English studies. The discipline as a whole believed in what is now called the transcendent subject, which is the belief that individual is antecedent to or transcends the forces of society, experience, and language. The next tenet of liberal humanism is the purpose of literature is to enhance life in a non-programmatic way, non-propagandistic way. The purpose of literature is to enhance life and the propagation of human values, but not in a programmatic way. If literature and criticism become overtly and directly political, they necessarily tend towards propaganda. And as Keats said, We distrust literature which too obviously wants to convert us or influence our views. So the literature should be non-programmatic and it should enhance our life. Otherwise, it would be propaganda, or otherwise, it would be overtly literature. So, according to Peter Berry, that the purpose of literature is to enhance life. It should be to enhance life in a non-programmatic way. The next principle of liberal humanism is that form and content should be fused organically in literature. Form and content in literature must be fused in an organic way so that the one grows inevitably from the other. Literary form should be like a decoration which is applied externally to a completed structure. Imagery, for instance, or any other poetic form which is detachable from the substance of the work in this way rather than being integrated with it is merely fanciful and not truly imaginative. So the form or and the content of the literature should be fused in organic whole. It should not look like these two things are separate, but it should look like form and content is one. They are fused in one organic whole. Next is text should be true or genuine, that it should articulate a truth in a new way that avoids cliché. Sincerity resides within the language of literature, noted by avoidance of cliché or inflated style so that the difference between words and things is abolished. This point about organic form applies above all to sincerity. Sincerity is a quality which resides within the language of literature. It isn't a fact or an intention behind the work, which could be gleaned by comparing, say, a poet's view of an event with other more factual versions, or from discovering independent external information about an author's history or conduct. Rather, sincerity is to be discovered within such matters as the avoidance of cliché. It shows in the use of first-hand individualistic description, in the understanded expression of feeling, whereby emotion is allowed to emerge implicitly from the presentation of an event. Moreover, when language achieves these qualities, then truly sincere poet can transcend the scene of distance between language and material and can make the language seem to enact what it depicts, thus apparently abolishing the necessary distance between words and things. So there should not be a difference between the word and what poet is describing, that thing. So the language should be genuine and he should express the real thing through his words. The next is text should show rather than tell. Showing is valued over telling. The concrete enactment is better than expository explanation. Again, the next idea follows from the previous one. What is valued one in literature is the silent showing or demonstrating of something rather than explaining or saying of it. Hence, ideas as such are worthless in literature until given the concrete embodiment of enactment. Thus, several of explicit comments and formulations often cited in literary history contain specific denigrations of ideas as such and have a distinct anti-intellectual flavor to them. Hence, we see the elevation of characteristic Englet idea of tactile enactment, of sensuous immediacy, of concrete presentation of thought, and so on. According to this idea, words should mine or demonstrate or act out or sound out what they signify, rather than just representing it in an abstract way. This idea is stated with special fervency in the works of F.R. Lewis. The next, the role of critic is to help the reader to unlock the true meaning of the piece. The job of criticism is to interpret the text, to meditate between text and the reader. A theoretical account of the nature of reading or of literature in general is not useful in criticism and will simply, if attempted, encumber critics with preconceived ideas which will get between them and the text. Perhaps in this phrase, preconceived ideas, we get another glimpse into nature of this pervasive distrust of ideas within liberal humanism. For there seems to be the notion that somewhat all ideas are preconceived, in the sense that they all will come between the reader and the text if given half a chance. There is, in fact, the clear mark here of what is called English empiricism, which can be defined as determination to trust only what is made evident to the senses or experienced directly. Ultimately, this evident to the senses or experienced directly. Ultimately, this attitude goes back at least to the philosophy of John Locke, which gives a philosophical expression to it. His book Essay Concerning to Human Understanding puts forward the view that ideas are formed when direct sense impressions from the world are imprinted on the mind. The mind assembles these, so giving rise to the process of thinking. Locke rejected introspective speculation as a source of valid knowledge and insisted on the need of direct experience and evidence of things. Traditional English studies, we must say, has always been Lockean in this sense. So there should be the direct experiences to the senses, and that the critic should help the reader to understand the text. What are the recurrent ideas in this critical theory? First, many notions that we habitually regard as fixed and reliable essences, like gender, identity, individual selfhood, literature itself, are fluid, unstable, socially constructed, contingent, provisional categories upon which no overcharging absolute truth can be established. So these notions are not fixed and not reliable on which we can trust. All thinking is affected and largely determined by ideological commitments. No mode of inquiry is objective, not even one's own thought or not even one's own ideas and thoughts are permanent. These ideas can be changed by ideological commitments. And third, language conditions and limits what we see, and all reality is linguistic textual construct. So language is just a textual construct. All reality is linguistic, as Peter Berry says in his Liberal Humanism. And fourth, all texts are webs of contradiction with no final court of appeals to have the judgment. So the text is the web of construction, and there is no final court of appeal that whether this text is true or not. Distrust of grand, totalizing theories or notions, including notion of great books that are somehow identifiably great regardless of a particular socio-political context. Likewise, concept of a human nature that transcends race, gender, class is not sound and can be shown to have effect of marginalization other categories of identification affiliation when some general human nature is invoked or appealed to. So we can conclude this theory before theory or liberal humanism that politics is pervasive, language is constitutive, truth is provisional, and meaning is contingent, and last, human nature is myth. So in this way, we have discussed the tenets of liberal humanism, and we have talked about that politics is pervasive, language is constitutive, truth is provisional, and meaning is contingent, human nature is myth. In this way, we have covered this topic, liberal humanism or the theory before theory by Peter Berry. Thank you, dear students, for watching this video. If you like this video, you can hit the like button or share this video to other students. And do not forget to subscribe my YouTube channel. In the days to come, we'll have some more videos on critical theories. Thank you.